Welcome to the webinar. We hope that you find this presentation informative and helpful and come away with a better idea of how to manage text messages, emails, and social media as public records. My name is Amy Christensen, and joining me is my co-presenter, Anna Lucas. Today, we will be covering 5 topics. We will start with a brief overview of who we are in the Records and Information Management Division of the Indiana Archives and Records Administration. Next, we will go over some records management basics. If you are already familiar with the basics, feel free to skip ahead. Then we will get to the heart of today's presentation and go over records management best practices for text messages, email, and social media. The Records and Information Management Division, otherwise known as RIM, is part of the Indiana Archives and Records Administration. RIM provides support in the form of training and assistance to help both state and county local government employees effectively manage their records. RIM has 3 program areas: state records management, county local records management, and electronic records. Together, these 3 programs support you. The RIM division is staffed by 6 professionals. Ann Young is our state records management liaison. She assists all state agencies with everything from retention schedules to questions about records management projects. I am the County Local Records Management Liaison, and Madison Young is our County Local Records Analyst. Together, we support Indiana's 92 counties with all their records needs, from updating retention schedules to questions or concerns about records. We have 2 electronic records archivists, Anna Lucas and Kalita Lopez. Together, they manage the electronic archives for the state by assisting with retention schedule updates, developing guidance, and accessioning archival records. The RIM division is overseen by our director, Megan Fukunaga, who supports all 3 program areas and the 6 professionals. Now that you know a little bit about who we are, let's touch on some records management basics. These 4 bolded terms are very useful to know and will be mentioned throughout this presentation. Retention schedules are the core of good records management. They act as your roadmap and instruction sheet all in one. Retention schedules tell you how long to properly dispose of records, whether that is sending them to the Indiana Archives or destroying them. They provide descriptive information to help you better organize your records, and they explain the life cycle of your records. All records have a life cycle, whether it's short or long. There are 3 stages: creation or receipt, maintenance and use, and final disposition. Final disposition simply refers to what happens to a record at the end of its life cycle. Options include retaining permanently in office for business use, transferring to the Records Center, this is for state agencies only, transferring to the Indiana Archives, and destruction. Some records may have a combination of these. For example, a database might be retained both permanently in office, and a subset of the data would be sent to the Indiana Archives. Lastly, when reading a retention schedule, you'll notice numbers listed on the left side of the page. These are called record series numbers, and they serve as unique identifiers for most types of records in the state. The biggest term to define is public records, and for this reason, it gets its own slide. We all create and receive public records every day in our jobs as public servants. Any piece of recorded information that you create or receive in the course of your work is a public record. Like all records, a public record can be in any format or on any media. It can be everything from a database to a text message, email, or social media post. It is important to note that just because a record is a public record does not mean it is open to the public for inspection. Confidential public records remain confidential in accordance with law. Now that you've had a primer in the basics of records management, here are a few handy resources to keep in mind. If you are new to records management or if you want to brush up on your skills, these resources are a great way to start. All state and county local staff should be familiar with retention schedules, both the general schedules and any agency or office specific schedules. General schedules can be used by everyone, so any county office can use the general schedule for all county local offices, and any state agency can use the general schedule for all state agencies. If you can't find what you're looking for on either the general schedule or an agency or office specific schedule, let us know and we can help you. We also offer a variety of guidance on managing your records for state and county employees, as well as guidance on electronic records. Check our website frequently as we are updating training this year. So let's talk about how to apply these records management basics to text messages, emails, and social media posts. Text messages can be one of the hardest public records to manage for a variety of reasons we'll discuss on these next few slides. The first thing to know is, when is a text message a public record? Any text message related to your work is a public record, regardless of the device used. There are three important things to consider when managing texts as public records. First, content. If the topic of a text has to do with the work of your agency or office, it is a public record. The second is the source. If a government employee sends a text about their work, it is a public record that belongs to the agency or office. And final point to keep in mind is the device. It does not matter what device or service provider sends the text message. Texts from a personal cell phone about the work of your agency or office are still public records. So how do you manage texts as public records? We have 6 tips to follow to help make this easier. Limit your use of text to conduct official business. It can be tricky to extract text messages from a phone or service provider and may require additional software. Limiting your use of text helps avoid any issues with retaining text as records. Always try to use work-issued devices if you do text about work. This makes it easier to extract text if necessary because you will not need to give your employer access to your personal cell phone. Make sure you are able to extract text if you do wind up communicating via text for work. Consider forwarding text to your work email if that is an option. There are also vendors that specialize in extracting text. If you use text to conduct work often, this may be a good option. Your device may also allow you to download them yourself. However you choose to extract text, make sure you are saving them to a secure, backed up location that is managed by your agency or office. Also ensure that everyone who might need access to them is able to do so. This is especially important for agency heads, elected officials, or anyone making policy decisions. There may be multiple formats available to you if you do download text or if you work with a vendor. Make sure to pick the format that works best for you, meaning it is accessible, usable without special software, and will be accepted by a court in the event of litigation. Now that you have some options for managing text as public records, let's talk about how to retain or keep them. Start by understanding the content. This will help you connect the text to a record series. Once you know the record series, you can figure out the best way to keep it and for how long. Keep in mind that just because you delete a text does not mean it's gone. If it can be recovered, it's not truly deleted. So it's important to understand what delete means for your service provider, if there are any recycle bins a deleted text goes into, and whether deleted texts are recoverable by you, a vendor, or the service provider, and for how long. Also remember, the relevant record series may be on your agency or office-specific schedule or on the general retention schedule. Now that you are an expert on text messages as public records, here are some key takeaways to remember. Texts about your agency's work are public records and subject to retention requirements. Avoid using text messages for policy, legal, or financial decisions. If you do, save those texts in a separate, secure location. Do not use personal devices for official business-related texts. Ensure you can extract any public record text if needed. Retain text based on content and retention schedules. Now I'll pass it over to my co-presenter, Anna Lucas.
Thank you, Amy. All right, now we'll switch to the topic of email. Of the three messaging tools, email is the most widely used amongst all government employees and can often be difficult to manage due to the sheer volume of messages received or sent. The first thing to determine is, when is an email a public record? Any email related to your work is a public record, regardless of the account that is used. Much like text messages, there are three important things to remember when managing emails as public records. First is content. Again, if the topic of the email has to do with the work of your agency or office, it is a public record. The second is the source. If a government employee sends an email about their work, it is a public record that belongs to their agency or office. And final is the account. It does not matter what account, whether business or personal, sends or receives the email. Emails from personal accounts about the work of your agency or office are still public records. So how do you manage emails as public records? We have 3 tips to follow to help with managing your emails. First is limit your personal use. Avoid using your work email address for anything non-work related. Second is manage your subscriptions. It's important to regularly delete emails you receive from professional organizations or external organizations you subscribe to. These do not need to be retained. To help with this, you can set up a rule in your email client to automatically send these types of email messages to a dedicated folder. This will help declutter your inbox. And thirdly, set aside time for regular inbox cleanups. This may seem like a hard task to stay on top of, but an annual cleanup can make a huge difference. Even just putting aside 10 minutes a day over the span of 2 weeks can have a big impact on how you can help manage your email records. Now that we have some best practices for managing your work emails, we can get into how to keep and retain them. To start, understand the content of the email, whether that be in the body of the message or its attachments. This will help you connect the email message to a record series. It's important to remember that not every email you receive needs to be maintained. Emails received from vendors, subscriptions, newsletters, or general announcements may not be records you need to maintain. With the record series identified, you will then know how long to keep that record. Since a large portion of government business is conducted over email, knowing the period of time that an email must be retained is extremely important. So some things to keep in mind are that most of the emails received will fall under what is the General Correspondence Record Series on your general schedule. You will want to familiarize yourself with any email policies or mailbox retention policies your agency or office has in place to ensure that you are able to retain any of the messages received for their required period of time or lifespan. And also, depending on your job roles and responsibilities, you may have emails that should eventually be transferred to the Indiana Archives. With those best practices and tips for managing your emails, what's important to remember about email is emails that are sent or received in the course of your work are public records, and those emails must be retained based on their content in accordance with the retention schedule. And another key takeaway is not every message you receive in your inbox is a public record, which is why it's important to manage your subscriptions, avoid using your work email for personal correspondence, and also trying to routinely clean out your inbox, which can occur either on a weekly, monthly, or annual basis. Now we can move along to social media as public records. Offices and agencies often utilize social media platforms as a means of outreach and information sharing for their constituents. Those posted communications shared by an agency's account, as well as any of the communications posted by the public, may qualify as a public record. But before getting into what social media posts are public records, let's determine what qualifies as social media. According to the American Records Management Association, social media is defined as tools and platforms, usually on the internet, specifically designed for participatory interactions such as publishing, conversing, and sharing content, including multimedia. The tools include, but are not limited to, blogs, wikis, photos or video sharing, microblogging, and other social networking sites. So some common social media platforms often used in government include, but are not limited to, platforms such as Facebook, X, LinkedIn, Instagram, Reddit, and Snapchat. When it comes to posts on these platforms, there are 3 conditions to consider to determine whether or not the post is a public record. First is whether the content of the post falls under a retention schedule. And if so, second is whether or not the post is also unique, meaning the content of the post is not saved or stored elsewhere in your office records. And third is whether the post was shared with an official agency account, or whether the content that was shared in the post was shared with an account on behalf of the agency. Social media overall can be a fantastic tool for engaging with the public, which is why it's so important to keep in mind that many of those social media posts may in fact be public records. Here are some best practice tips to follow when using social media for government business. Have a content moderation plan. This would be a written procedure that outlines how to appropriately respond to comments from the public, when it's appropriate to remove content or comments from the public, and when to potentially turn off comments. You should also have a content capture plan for posts and comments that meet the conditions of a public record. Many platforms allow creators to download posts or histories, and there are also vendors available that specialize in archiving social media. When capturing content, make sure to pick a format that works best for your office, meaning content will be accessible, usable without special software, and will be acceptable by a court in the event of litigation. You should also have a content retention plan to know how long to keep the content you are posting on social media. You will use your retention schedules to develop your content retention plan. It is also a best practice to save posts and comments that are public records to an offline location. Social media platforms are not designed with records retention or records management best practices in mind, which is why you should be storing your public records in a secure location that your agency or office manages. And this is particularly important because social media platforms are not forever. It is important to have an exit plan in place. If the social media platform is sunsetting, you should have a plan to capture and move your content elsewhere. With those tips, we can get into how to retain social media posts and comments. Most social media posts will fall under the following record series: correspondence, disaster notification and response, events, programs, products and services, photographs and videos, press releases, surveys, and training and education. Remember, you will need to review your general retention schedule or your office or agency specific schedule to determine how long these must be retained. So in a nutshell, social media posts and comments are considered public records when certain considerations are met. First, that the content of the post falls under a retention schedule, the content of the post is unique, and the post is shared via an official agency account or on behalf of the agency. Your agency or office should have a plan for content moderation, capture, and retention, as well as an exit plan if the platform becomes unavailable. For your social media posts and comments that are public records, be sure to save those records offline in a secure location. And lastly, your social media posts are to be retained based on their content following a retention schedule. So to summarize the topics covered here today, here is a quick recap of some of the main takeaways for managing text, email, and social media public records. Text, emails, and social media posts are public records when they are about the work of your agency or office. Public records must be managed and retained appropriately for their scheduled lifespan. And to determine the scheduled lifespan of a text, email, or social media post, start with the content. Locate a record series that best fits the content by looking at the general retention schedule or agency or office specific schedule. And some key best practices for each of the areas covered are: for text, do not conduct official business via text when possible. For email, do not use your work email for personal business. And for social media, have a content moderation, capture, and retention plan.
Thank you for viewing this webinar. If you have any questions or comments on the topics and content covered in this presentation, please feel free to contact any of the listed emails, and we look forward to hearing from you.